Please welcome Chief Information Security Officer for ConnectWise, Patrick Beggs.
Work it, make it, do it, makes us harder, better, faster, stronger.
Wow. That don't kill me, can only make us stronger. I need you to hurry up, man, cause I can't wait much longer.
Keep coming in, come on, keep coming in, come on, let's go. Thank you, wow. I guess it wasn't too painful of a night. I really appreciate everyone showing up this morning. I know it's not for me because I got some great guests lined up here to come talk to you guys about some really cool stuff. So thank you for making it early. Did a good time at House of Blues last night? Did anybody? Yeah? No? Yeah? Whatever. It's good. All right. I saw some dancing out there. I see some of you. Yeah, it's pretty good. So thanks again. Appreciate everyone showing up this morning and all the energy that has been brought so far this week, man. It's been inspiring. So my favorite week of the year, I gotta say, because usually I have to say no a lot at my company, and everyone likes me this week, so it's kind of cool. So. Hey, we're here to talk about the JCDC, right? A whole nation approach to cybersecurity. The Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative brings together cyber defenders from the federal government and the private industry to safeguard the United States' critical infrastructure against cyber threats. The JCDC will be sharing insights into their 2023 planning agenda, as well as what this partnership means for MSPs and across the country. Before I introduce them, folks, if you don't know about my background, it's very special to me. I started a couple years into my federal government career, I went over to DHS and helped stand up a lot of the functionality and the premise of what they're doing, they've taken to the much next level. So it's kind of like a proud parent, again, another proud parent moment for me, right? Is what CISA has been doing for critical infrastructure. It's how I started my federal government career, is doing incident response and cyber assessments for small and medium businesses that needed the help, and this was back in the 2000s. But I couldn't be more excited to have them talk about how far these folks have taken this to just completely another level. So please let me welcome on stage Abby and Bree from CISA's JCDC Cyber Operations. Thank you. Thank you. All right, get to sit down too. This is fun. All right. Before we get into some of the nitty-gritty questions we're going to talk about, just give us a beat for both of you, Abby and Bree. Give us some background on who you are, where'd you come from, what you're doing. So.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pretty surprised to see so many smiling faces this morning. So I am Abby Thoennes. No one can say my last name, so I clarify it now. I have been working for the federal government for 15 years. I was working in the DoD background, Department of Navy, Intel side of the house. And I just recently transitioned over to CISA in the planning shop the last 6 months. And it's been an interesting experience to see the mix of federal and private sector, and I'm excited to be here.
Great. Bree Johnson. My background, I was a defense contractor for over 12 years. Started out internally, focused on internal business development, cybersecurity strategy for the organization, operations mostly within cyber-facing P&L centers. Moved over to working with DHS in PPD in a contractor role. NPPD is CISA's predecessor. And for about 3 years, supported a front office and worked as a planner. And earlier this year, in January, moved over to being a federal employee for JCDC. The mission really resonates with me, and I'm looking forward to continuing to really support this customer set and just our mission overall.
Awesome. And I gotta say thank you, both of you. Thank you for your serving your country and doing what you're doing to protect us. So we can't thank you enough for that. So, all right. During the keynote, we discussed the partnership between CISA and JCDC and the MSP community, as well as vendors like ConnectWise, right? So what is the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative's vision, mission in relation to the audience here today? So bring it home to the why here. So.
JCDC's vision and mission is really inherently applicable to this audience. JCDC's vision is for our nation to achieve collective security in cyberspace. And really that's centered on the notion that together we can achieve far more than we can apart. And that is a systemic shift in the balance of power from malicious cyber actors to cyber defenders. CISA's mission is to unite the global cyber community in the collective defense of cyberspace. So really the very nature of what so many of you in this audience are doing to try to become aware of, stay ahead of cybersecurity issues, secure yourselves, and secure your customers, and so many of which are small and medium-sized businesses, is really in line with ultimately what JCDC is trying to do. And so we're really excited for the push for that and supporting you all in that.
Excellent. All right. All right. Can you guys speak a little bit to the involvement the JCDC is from both the government and the private sector, and why that partnership is crucial to JCDC's success? So, again, another why question, right? And how how are we intertwined?
JCDC participants really work collectively together to enable synchronized cybersecurity planning, cyber defense, and response. Our private sector partners range from service providers to infrastructure operators to cybersecurity companies, companies across critical infrastructure sectors, and also subject matter experts. From the U.S. government participant side, that includes other members of DHS, U.S. Cyber Command, the National Security Agency, FBI, DOJ, Department of Justice, and the Office of Director of National Intelligence. From just a broader perspective, other partners include over 100 international partners, otherwise known as CERTs, where we work to protect against and quickly share information at a global level to protect against cyber threats. And from another side of the house is working with information sharing organizations like ISACs and ISALs to quickly share cybersecurity threat information across a broader community.
And I'll add a little bit on that comment, is how we've seen it operationally already. I think we started this in January.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, there's been a bi-directional exchange of information from my organization to y'all and back and forth. Mm-hmm. And some threats have been mitigated, and I'm not just making that up. The threats have been mitigated seamlessly because of the information that's coming back and forth. Maybe a little example of how that works?
Sure. So what we've been starting since January is, and we've kind of touched base a little bit about this, is that part of what we do within JCDC is create cyber defense plans, and so part of that is also creating a core planning team. And that made up of the partners in which Bree spoke to. And specifically with this one is that we were working with the vendors as well as what we're calling the RMM ecosystem. And so they're the tip of the spear, so to speak. And then as we go down the pyramid, we kind of see you all as MSPs fit into that role, and then the small, medium businesses. And so what's been really, really enlightening and really exciting is that when some sort of conversation happens about a tipper or some sort of information, mm-hmm. we immediately are passing that to our analytical team, mm-hmm. as well as our threat hunting team, and then they're absolutely, going down the rabbit hole to make sure we stop whatever's going on. And then we're passing the information back to our core planning team members to let them know that not only are they absolutely getting something out of the relationship with us, but we're getting something out of them. And the fact that we're having that mutual exchange of information is something that will always be a great way forward against cybersecurity.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the clarification on that. That helps, really does. All right, looking ahead to the near future, 23, 24, and beyond, what are the top goals for JCDC?
So I would say the top goals for JCDC, as we talked about a little bit, is that we're pretty new in terms of the establishment within CISA. And so really it's the idea of continuing to expand through multiple ways. Expand through relationships, expand through defense cyber planning, expand through product development in terms of making sure that we're getting the right information to the right audience in a timely manner. So I think what we'll see over the next year Currently, right now, we have a whole team working on what would be future plans that we would look to work with you all as a community and beyond and within the industry partners. And so as they develop those topics, whether it's through threat analysis or trends within the IC community or trends within the industry community, we're coming together and we'll figure out a way to kind of tackle those. And most of the time, it's kind of like tackling an elephant. You got to take one bite at a time. Yep. But it's definitely the right way forward. Yep. So I see within like the next 2 years, the development of more and more planning, and then the evolution of how we mature that process and develop metrics through that as we see plans as we get.
Great, excellent. All right. So let's shift a little bit. Maybe you could tell the audience about some of the, just baseline some of the services and assistance that CISA can provide MSPs, and where can they access the information? So, I mean, obviously, you guys have a lot going on and a lot of capabilities, right? That I would believe most people in this audience probably don't even know about. So, talk about, some of those pretty cool services that you guys offer for free.
Yeah, for free. Yeah, that's the key, right? Everything's for free from the government. Take that for what it is, right?
And they're here to help.
Yeah, they're here to help. Yeah, just because we knock on your door doesn't mean we're after you. Doesn't mean run away though either, right? So we have a lot of services at CISA, broader than just the JCDC, obviously too, and so. One of the things that I think has been really a great asset in the development of CISA are these free services so that those small, medium businesses that don't have necessarily the budget can really utilize them. Obviously, there is some time, so you aren't going to go click tomorrow and have some guy knock on your door to do an assessment. But some of those, there's some very specific things. So if you were to go to CISA.gov, you can see the free service site. And within that site, there are multiple aspects that we can talk to. One of them being the KEV, which is the Knowledge Vulnerability Management process.
Yeah, the known exploited vulnerability catalog.
And so that is a great tool that people can get, and it's done by our VM, which is the Vulnerability Management Office, and they're going through and they'll do assessments of variety on your system. They're also, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's a really great resource too, where if from your perspective, you can go to find the latest vulnerabilities that have been reported and try to work with your customer sets to make sure that they're secure from those.
Yeah, and I think one of the really major things is making sure you're getting the alerts and the type of, you can sign up so you're getting them directly to you as a business. And so those are absolutely vital in terms of being kind of up to date in terms of what's being pushed out to the cybersecurity bubble, so to speak. And so there's been some really great ones lately that have come out of CISA. The Living Off the Land one was a big push that got pushed out last week. It is regarding PRC and the involvement and how they're looking at different vulnerabilities within the IC Cybersecurity Network. So that was really great, and that was jointly done with us and NSA and FBI. And so that's one of the things I think we're also trying to expand is our partnerships within interagency and making sure that folks know that it's not just CISA pushing out one thing, it's a community going out and pushing out a collective response.
Yep.
I'm gonna jump on this a little bit because I just add more to this question. So I'm in, say, Omaha, Nebraska, right? We're in Washington, we're all in the Washington, D.C. area, right? It's more of an epicenter of what all this is going on. What kind of, who do I have out in Omaha, Nebraska, right, to help me out?
Yeah,
is there any, that maybe a medium-sized MSP, right, that operates, literally operates critical infrastructure, right?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit yesterday in our little surprise live chat, but regional support is huge within CISA, and it's the only way that CISA is able to really tackle all the issues because we have, we're defending the nation, and the nation is a big country as it is, and so everything isn't going to be done through DC. So each of the regions there's 10 regions divided up across the U.S. to include Alaska and Hawaii and Guam and some of the other territories, and each of those regions has their own site within CISA, and what's really great is that they have their own email address, their own point of contact, and so as a MSP from Nebraska, what was it, Omaha, right?
Sure.
So you're want to reach out to your region, to be honest, because they're gonna have a much better understanding in terms of response because they're right there on the ground.
Yep.
Two, they know the highs and lows of
Yep.
the region, and
Yep.
so they're gonna have a better understanding of who you should reach out to, what type of critical infrastructure is vulnerable in this
Yep.
area of the country,
Yep.
as well as they are obviously going to be able to reach back to headquarters. So in no way does it, prevent you guys from going specifically to the headquarters site and clicking on services and things of that nature. But I highly encourage you to know your rep, kind of like if you're a, season ticket holder to some stadium and that rep keeps pushing you things, that's a good thing to have, right? It's a relationship that you're immediately going to get information. And
Relationship.
It's about sharing the information in a timely manner, and if they know things about your company, then they can help push that out.
Such a great idea. I wonder who came up with that idea.
Don't know. Not really documented, so it's hard to tell.
Oh, it is, by the way. I have a screenshot of my whiteboard. No, it's okay.
I'm pretty sure that's illegal. We'll talk about that.
No, but to your point, it's relationships, right?
Yeah.
That's my whole point of this is to establish those local and regional relationships. And also, I know you guys have events across the country where they bring folks together. Again, so they can really talk to folks that are in the same space, and they can understand the challenges that they're going through and the successes as well. So.
And those are going to be the reps that if you do get some sort of free service, they're going to be the ones that come and help facilitate that conversation to figure out what you need and what's going on. So don't be afraid when they knock.
Yeah. So you can find the POCs and all that information through the CISA.gov website. It's a great resource for all the free tools and services, regional rep POC information, that nature.
So we talk about at a high level, right? The services and the capabilities that CISA and JCDC bring to the table, right? And again, really encourage everyone to go look at the catalog. Again, I hear all the time, I'm sure you hear it every day, is, wow, we didn't know you could help with that, right?
Yeah.
At the light bulb moment, it's pretty cool, right? I mean, so how do we encourage, what is that first step sometimes always the hardest, how can we encourage players in the community to fully engage with these initiatives? Specifically what you guys are doing right now, I mean, the regional stuff aside, but specifically what you guys are doing right now, what's some suggestions that you have?
So the biggest one is make sure you understand kind of what the planning agenda is. And so currently, as Bree talked about, there are 6 topics, and go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. So one thing I had meant to mention earlier, too, is that so in late 2022, CISA JCDC released its 2023 planning agenda, which focuses on cyber defense topics relating to systemic risk, cyber incident response, and also protecting high-risk communities. And there are 6 planning agenda topics. One of them is related to RMM, MSPs. Patrick's very familiar with that one. And so that's a great way that the community can get involved, become aware of these planning agenda topics, and we will also be releasing a planning agenda for 2024. And so if you're interested in getting involved in that and providing input information, keep an eye out through the CISA.gov website for the 2024 release. Right. And there's a CISA.jcdc mailbox that you can reach out to if you're interested as well. And
to build upon that a little bit is, so we also will reach out to you guys, right? So us coming to these kind of events or going to, coming to big cybersecurity conferences, if you see a JCDC person or you see a CISA person and you feel like you want to figure out what's going on or how you can get involved as an MSP or as any type of small, medium businesses, we encourage you to just go talk to them, because we don't know what we don't know in a lot of ways. The MSP community is a very large community, and we're able to get in contact with folks through our networking and through the topics in which we're talking about. But if there's something that you feel or you're seeing a trend specifically within critical infrastructure within the U.S., we want to make sure we're hearing that, and not to say that we're going to go jump and make a plan tomorrow, but it's something that you guys have the ability to pass along in a much more hands-on capability than per se some of the other groups. And that's why we really encourage the regional connection too, because if they're seeing a trend in an area, then maybe we look at it specifically in a region's perspective.
Right.
But that's definitely a huge plus.
That's enough for telemetry, for you guys to know if something larger scale is going on. I can't encourage enough is that type of communication, right? If it smells funny, it might be something that you guys need to know about. And again, they're here. They really are here to help. This is, I know, you'll know it when you see it. That's for sure. So really appreciate those endeavors. So a product just dropped yesterday, right?
Yeah. So it was a RAS product, so a remote access software product that just came out. So as one of the planning, as we talked about, one of the planning topics was RMM and scaling security through that and through what we've dubbed the RMM ecosystem, as I talked about earlier. And through that endeavor, we've not only had great conversation between us as vendors, MSPs, and the federal government, but we also were able to create these lines of efforts that ultimately are making sure that we're getting the right information out to you. So part of that result of that was that RAS products, where we had members of the core planning team, amongst other interagencies and other industry partners, do a chop on the product. And what that allowed us to do was really, number one, they butchered it, and they should have. It was great. And the production team was really excited for the big red lines through it, because they don't get that kind of feedback from the actual audience that would utilize it. And so being able to get the end user feedback up was a huge win for us, because it changed the trajectory of the product completely. And it was a right shift to move it. And if we hadn't, we would have gotten questions like, this has no value, this isn't the right audience, you're mixing signals while you're doing it. Right. And so the ability within just our effort allowed us to do something in parallel with production to push that out. And so that's kind of also the really, really wonderful gain we've gotten with part of these cyber defense planning, is we're creating these different avenues and where we can not only improve, but also utilize the team and the expertise that we have in the room.
Excellent, great. All right, here's the awkward part of the whole presentation. You guys get to ask me some questions. So I really appreciate you guys stepping up to do that as well, because I think, from our perspective as well, right? And we're going to do some audience questions as well. So we're going to try to get everybody involved here. So I'll let you guys fire away.
So like the planning effort we've done with you with RMM, what do you see any initiatives that the JCDC RMM planning effort could add value to the MSP community?
So I'm going to say, during question and answer, some folks can disagree or agree or not, but I'm going to say its relevance to the specific, the uniqueness of the MSP community. And folks are like, what do you mean? It's an MSP. They're not unique. Well, actually, they are, because they're small and medium businesses they're not defense contractors with large budgets, right? The defense industrial base pushes out products and services that are geared towards, billion-dollar businesses, right? The relevance here that you guys are trying to understand is so valuable that you're reaching out to that community to say, hey, tell us how this affects you. Tell us how these products actually work versus just some research, right? So bringing in those voices of those folks and the relevance of what it would mean if an RMM went down for them, right? It wasn't available, right? Or if a specific sector that they support, right, is being attacked, right, and is called into question. So I think the relevance and the tailoring to, not everything fits all the time. So, and that's, a lot of respect that you guys are doing that, because, sometimes folks, you just want to put stuff out, oh, they'll figure it out. Some large scale guidance doesn't always fit everybody. So, yeah.
That's definitely been something we've learned too, just being here the past few days, just how large, diverse, and the challenge set that this audience has with trying to secure so much of the backbone of our U.S. economy, just with the small and medium-sized businesses that you're supporting. And so that's definitely a great takeaway, and something that we appreciate on our end, just how much of a large lift and effort that is. So we really appreciate what you guys are doing there.
Yeah, to build off of that, and is also, I think what was really great is we knew as part of our planning effort how much of the value of information we were getting from the MSPs, but to come here and see the eagerness of folks wanting to do more and be involved more has been really eye-opening, because I think there is absolutely opportunity for everyone to be involved in some manner. You all have a very variety type of customer, and depending on who your base is or not, it doesn't matter, because you have an insight that will obviously always be faster than something that we are getting from news outlets or anything else like that.
There's a buzz going on. I mean, we did a live stream yesterday. You guys did the announcements and tagged us, and the MSP community at large. And Jen Easterly, I know, jumped on social media and started talking about it. That's huge for this community. It really is. So I can't thank you enough for raising that awareness and bringing them into the fold.
For those who don't know, she's the director of
yes,
CISA.
Right, and she's has been a thought leader in cyber for a long time.
Yeah.
And her heart and soul is in this. Really.
Yeah, and she's really committed to really growing JCDC as a whole. I think she sees the value coming from the private sector here to federal government, that cybersecurity isn't a one-way street, and there's no way to completely separate the two. So find ways to merge it where we can.
Yeah, it really reflects a kind of a new posture in the way that the government is seeing the value of collaboration and really getting our hands dirty, focusing on problem sets with members of the communities that we're trying to address. It's not coming at things from just our side of the federal government, but it's really involving you. You all know your ecosystem the best, and so that's not something that we're thinking that we can answer better than you. And so that's really why we want to work together and partner and collaborate and continue those relationships moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I've got another question for you, Patrick.
All right.
If you were to give an example of some topics from the partner community that JCDC or CISA could really focus on, what might they be?
All right, I'm going to try not to be too controversial here, but I'll poke the bear a little bit. First of all, it's what I've heard this week and over my time at ConnectWise is one of the resources you already mentioned is the vulnerability management assistance that you have, right? There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of one-stop shop assistance and automation that actually can be incurred to small and medium businesses, for MSPs, for help in vulnerability management. I mean, I'm on my soapbox about that all the time, and it's such a core, just a tenet of cyber hygiene that folks need to have in place and managed correctly. So I would say that would be one thing, as that CISA can continuously do, right? I'll throw something out there a little bit, a little edgy, is on, the cyber insurance challenge, right? Is to help provide better guidance and influence. That not all entities are created equal, right? And unfortunately, sometimes, the way they're assessed, again, goes back to that defense industrial base, example. Nothing wrong with that, but not a small, medium business doesn't necessarily have the risk profile a billion-dollar defense contractor would. So I think we have to get our hands around how cyber insurance is assessed, right? Because people cannot be out there without it, right? It's having a car without seatbelts, right? Or car insurance, right? So the same way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to answer that, I know CISA put out a product last summer for the kind of best practices for MSPs. It was in May of 2022. And so that is a good guide in terms of having just a baseline understanding of what CISA sees. Yeah. But I think one of the things we've learned from this week is that it's constantly changing. And so that guide from May is probably in some ways outdated in terms of how we've done things or how you guys are doing things. And that's something we're going to take back to make sure that people understand that there's a cadence of updating these things. Yep. The other thing is we heard insurance in a lot of ways and in a lot of different ways. It's a tricky one for the U.S. government. So we'll take that back, but
guidance is always a good thing, right?
Guidance
you don't have to, you just say guidance, right?
But it's definitely something that it's not something that can be ignored. To your point, it's a growing friction or concern or
dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we'll make sure to pass it along to the right folks.
Certainly, and while CISA is not a regulatory, compliance in that way agency, working with our other partners across the U.S. government to help ensure that this sort of thing is kept in mind as we're coming out with definitions and guidance related to cybersecurity, and having that dynamic problem set in mind will hopefully help.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that, and with just, again, just keeping things relevant, right? And I think that really was the answer I was kind of, pushing towards on that. And I think there's a lot of folks that I've talked to, they're like, they're excited about, again, just being part of the conversation, right? And on the intelligence sharing side of the house, right? I mean, it's so great that you guys can push out these products that they can actually see and read, right? And understand that there are folks out there that are targeting them. And by the way, you guys are out there trying to kick their butts for doing it. So we appreciate that as well. But again, the protection mechanisms are put in place that I think, in the relevance for the community, right? To continue to develop those products, right? If you can, to that are targeted towards this community, because again, I think will be just so valuable for folks as well. So yeah, those were good questions. I appreciate that. I think we're going to get some good ones from the crowd, but before we do that, I just want to thank our panel for this morning's session. Again, we did a live stream yesterday. I'm hearing the kind of a buzz in the crowd. That you guys are making your rounds and really building some relationships. So it's been really cool to hear about that. And I'm going to have to ask you guys back next for IT Nation, and then this might just be this could be a normal occurrence. I hope so. Really appreciate
Hopefully
that.
the plan will be the RMM plan will be approved and signed for our portion by then, and we can do a bit more detail of what we put out to the public, so you guys can see the efforts that's been going on the last 5 months.
No,
All right, so
really appreciate you having us.
Oh man, easy to do, that's for sure. So let's get into some questions from the audience. If everybody has, so there we can see you guys. Oh, it's so nice. So the crowd got bigger while we were talking. So
People woke up, their alarm.
So I know there's some mics around the room. So please don't be shy.
Hi, my name's, wow, that's really loud.
Where are we at?
Dave Alton here from Los Angeles, MSP owner. You talk a lot about the collaboration, and I'd really like to understand how you guys are working with the FBI and other law enforcement agencies to kind of help guide us. What are the right things to do when there's an incident, when we have to do something, because there's this real push-pull situation. Once law enforcement gets involved, everything stops.
Sure.
And these people still need to do business, right? That's
right.
And so there's an economic impact and a lot of other impacts. Do you guys have any guidance or suggestions on how to kind of handle that push-pull?
Yeah.
So specifically, are you looking at what type of, is it more like a ransomware situation, or just generically when they have an involvement into that process?
Yeah, well, one, when do we get law enforcement involved? That's always a great question.
Yeah.
And then two, I think there are, telltale signs when, hey, this is a much bigger problem.
Right.
We really need some help on what do we do? And, I know we all have our ideas of what the right way to do that is.
Sure.
But it's a challenge when you have a business owner going, I need to get back up and running, right? And that's what they pay me for, quite honestly.
Right.
So how do you manage that and deal with it?
So there's a couple ways I would recommend it, and obviously we can't speak 100% on FBI, but the idea is if it's specifically going with cybersecurity or some sort of that aspect, is getting to know your regional rep would be great, because they also have a relationship with the local FBI, and so having that already have a tie-in can potentially help you move things quicker and get back running faster. The other thing is making sure that, I think, and again, this is a little bit of my opinion because I can't quite speak for the FBI, but having everything as documented and as upfront as possible, so that you aren't necessarily constantly getting you need this, we need that. And so if you have that, then potentially you can start kind of in parallel fixing the issue that needs to be done or something like that. Specifically for ransomware, though, there's Stop Ransomware campaign through CISO, which is jointly done through the JRTF, which is the Joint Task Force Cyber Task Force for Ransomware, which is FBI and CISA combined. And so we encourage you to go to the site for that and read a bit about that, but that also has a whole process for victims and how notifications happen, and they're immediately working together from the get-go. So that's a great, if it's specifically for ransomware, I recommend going through that and going through your region to get those processes moving.
Yes, CISA and FBI obviously have very different authorities and very different mission sets, and FBI gets involved from a law enforcement perspective when there's specific criminal activity that's occurring, and of course we think about this, well, it's all criminal activity, but it's understood the pain points where once you start an official law enforcement investigation, it kind of slows down messaging, slows down communication, and CISA and FBI really are focused on, there's all the time collaboration and information sharing going back and forth, and one of the areas that we're really focused on is making sure that we're partnered with FBI so that when there is a major incident, in so much as CISA can rapidly release information and guidance for the broader community is in relation to that we're doing that. And so there's an increased focus on being able to do that and partnering with FBI in those situations to do so.
And just one quick last question. How do you guys feel, like what is your mechanism for releasing that information quickly? Because right now, it's like all over the place.
CISA's CISA.gov has a resource and product page in which that's your go-to shop for the release of guidance on response.
Just want to make sure I have a clarification. When you say like what we determine gets released or how it gets released?
No, I'm thinking more how do you push that out to all of us?
Sure. Yeah, so currently right now it's through the website and having that, but part of the whole development of these core planning teams and establishing these relationships within these, what we're calling operational communities, the MSP community, is that we understand that if we push it out to you directly, you have a much faster turnaround to your customer base and understand that you can continuously do that. So one of the things that we're working toward within JCDC specifically is making sure we're utilizing you guys and the network that you have, right? If we were to say, hey, go to CISA.gov, which is a great resource, it takes, 3 clicks longer than it should be when I can shoot it to you in an email, or, partners and what we have, or we shoot it to ISOs over there. And so I think that's part of it, right? Is the whole point of the building of these relationships and these planning initiatives is not only to tackle a problem, but to create the relationships and networks that then you can then push out to your customers.
The push for amplifying the messaging, so when something comes out that's relevant, in this case to this audience, leveraging the partnerships, the relationships that we have through the RMM planning effort to make sure that y'all are aware of it and that you can push it out broader within your own networks. Yeah.
Shift over here. I can see a shadow over here.
That's about right. The shadow with a voice.
The shadow with a voice.
Jason Slagle here, CWR. In your latest document that you released, you called out the developers of remote management software to be secure by default. We live in an industry where traditionally, especially some of the larger vendors, don't have a good history of releasing products that are secure by default. So what is CISA doing to attempt to change that tide to try to make security by default something that happens?
Sure. Thank you, Shadow. I appreciate it. Realistically, obviously we're a federal entity, and so we really rely on strategic policy that's coming down and then strategic policy within CISA. And so recently, I'm sure you guys all hot off the press as read it, was the National Cybersecurity strategy came out in March from the White House. And one of the things that calls out specifically in that strategy is secure by design. And so obviously, the CISA has already been focusing on secure by design, as it was talked about in a couple products and things of that nature. But also, there was a whole presentation as RSA by the JCDC production team. So to your point, yes, we absolutely recognize that there's going to be some legacy and there's going to be some, small movement toward a better, broader secure by design and, secure by default. And so I think what we done specifically also with the RMM plan is we recognize that is higher policy and that's coming, and that as the partnerships continue to develop, we want to make sure that where we can put out potentially best practices guidance of understanding that this is the first step, and that as software developers continue to grow within vendors or continue to grow within the market, they're automatically taking these simple things and making it a default, and that shows, and it has a cascading effect, right? It affects how insurances look at things and everything else that goes with that. So the user as a day-to-day basis. It also helps what I've been calling like that grandma language, right? There's a great IT person, but I need you to dumb it down. So I need you to give me the nice, simple, is it on or off? Not enable, which one are you? So to me, I think it's a really great comment, and I think that we're definitely moving toward that, and that at the national level, we recognize that is something that the private sector will continue to want to push.
Yeah, within CISA, secure by design, secure by default is definitely one of our focus areas within our organization. There's a new push internally focused on that, and so part of what to our planning effort we're going to look to do is to determine if we can develop some more guidance to help your community with that.
Great.
Whoa, that's loud. I'm excited to hear about your organization. I wasn't really familiar with it before. And I apologize in advance if what I'm about to ask for has already been addressed. In my mind, there are two ways that our organizations can be benefited. Number one is we need to understand how to work through procedurally with the government or without. For example, one of the questions I keep asking in sessions here is there are entities and governments that we are unallowed to pay if they hack us because we'll be breaking laws. We need greater clarity procedurally on how to move forward. On the other side of the coin, I find that small and medium businesses often think we're lying, we just want to sell them something. So guidance aimed at the small, medium business, backing us up on talking about security, the minimum standards that they need. Those two things would be amazingly valuable to us, in my opinion.
So we can tackle this through two ways here. So the first one, yes, I agree that processes should be good. The federal government loves a good process, right? It takes forever to get done. Someone will have to call you back. It's a process. But I see your point. And the problem is right now it's there's so many variants that happen in some of these scenarios. And you're right, there are always going to be limitations on who you, from a legal and from a national level, federal level, who you are able to interact with in certain manners. And what I go back to what I encourage you to do is talk to those regional folks, because they're the ones who are going to be able to kind of guide you through that. But also, if it's a large enough issue that you're finding within your peers that these bad actors or these potentially non-state actors, however you want to phrase it, continuously have an impact into your community, that's something we want to know. Because then we can look at that and figure out if it's a broader trend, or is it just focusing on a certain customer base or certain critical infrastructure aspect. And I think that's something that we would love to hear about, and we encourage you to kind of report that. The second part regarding I apologize, I'm blanking a little bit.
So with the customer set that you work with, small, medium-sized businesses having sometimes apprehension about some of the security recommendations that you're making, certainly encourage you, as it would be appropriate and per the context, absolutely point them to CISA resources that support what you're trying to encourage them to do in terms of security measures. It's the government, and we are here to help. But in so much as that can help amplify and address the measures, we certainly encourage you to reference and refer them to the guidance from CISA. And in so much as you have recommendations of other types of security guidance and stuff, whether it's working through your regional representative, reaching out to the CISA emails, other points of contact, we want to hear that. And so, we know that you guys are facing a lot of uphill battles, so to speak, and if there's messaging that's really important to your broader customer set and could really make a difference, we want to hear about that too.
And the other thing to tell those small, medium businesses is that they're not ignored at CISA. They're absolutely embedded in a lot of the things that are happening on a day-to-day basis. A really great example is there's a supply chain management task force that has been looking at the implementations of supply chain, and they're coming out with a new charter this summer. But they have specific working groups that are about small, medium businesses and understand that their supply chain issues are different than a larger company. And so knowing that the information that we're also passing out to you absolutely has them involved might be another way to kind of bridge the gap of, hey, I'm not just talking out of this hand, other people are saying it too. And we're happy to reach out specifically if you have something question.
I see my shadow over here.
Yes.
Oh, I can actually see.
I'm here. Okay. Hi, thank you so much for your time. I'm Tina with SiteDeploy, a tech vendor. Would you be able to address how you all, I guess, come up with the tools that are available through CISA for use by the community? Are those developed in-house? Do you contract out to get those? What's that process?
Yeah, there's a variety of different ways, at the risk of seeming vague there's a variety of different ways. Several of them are developed in-house, some of them are contracted and developed through that mechanism, and some are developed in partnership with private sector companies as well. So there's a variety of different mechanisms. Some are in-house, some are through partners.
To your point about how and why certain ones come up with it, there isn't, I wouldn't say, an actual methodology of why certain ones are brought in other than others. I think it's about trends. If we're seeing that there is a trend or if there is some sort of incident that's happening broadly, then we obviously want to try and address it. Another thing that, for example, something like elections, right? When the elections is a very serious topic for obviously CISA and the nation, and so there were specific things that were based on topic-based that came out for services to be able to push out to the right communities so they could have security for their processes.
So is that coming through like sam.gov? Is it coming through like a CIBR with like DHS S&T? Like what is I know there's a variety of ways in which they come in, but what are the ways in which you are kind of pulling in that assistance to get those tools?
So we can talk offline about that. There's because it depends, and I'm not quite sure we're going to talk about how things get pulled in to the CISA.gov website here.
Okay, I got it.
These guys have this is an audience I'm not sure I want to share that with.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
That's a compliment, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Especially after how I learned I can get hacked. Give you guys that domain, that would just be bad.
In the middle here.
So my company is a little unique where we both operate as an MSP, but also as an engineering firm for critical infrastructure. And so every funding mechanism coming out that many of the MSPs, especially ones that do work for municipalities, may not realize is that all the funding is tied to the new requirements that you must comply to the NIST framework, generic high level. Otherwise, you could lose funding. CISA was great establishing the CPGs, but is that what's going to be held as the standard? Who will end up auditing that? Because there's talk of audits. Who is that going to fall upon? We're kind of just in the open, not understanding really what we need to follow.
So is the question, I might ask you to kind of repeat it.
At this point in time, do the CPGs that CISA publish, do they meet the minimum standards that are required, like in the Jobs Act, IIJA, BEAD funding, which is coming out for broadband service providers? And if not, does CISA have any more direction? And do you guys also have any idea who will audit and be responsible for following up and regulating that?
We could definitely talk a little bit more in detail offline with you if you'd like, just to make sure we've got your question, and that also we could point you to the right folks within CISA. That's not particularly within our swim lane, but we want to make sure that we get your question answered, because I know that that's...
But it also ties to the MSP space, because if
Sure.
you're working for a municipality that has a water plant that has to have audits,
So
Yeah.
some of that you have to remember is there's for example, the water plant. There are other SRMAs that are the ones who are doing the regulatory process for the water. We, as CISA, aren't necessarily the regulators in that process. So as money and processes get done through the support of that, which in your case, the water sector itself, you probably want to reach out more to the SRMA side of the house for the auditing process because they're the ones who are holding the standardization. To your point, though, if our hand in hand as you're doing this and part of the process of getting the funds, that's probably a gap that is, I know we work with a little bit with SRMA. I know we work a lot with SRMAs, but we actually have a whole plan on the agenda this year regarding water. And so maybe we could talk offline. We would love to maybe pull your thoughts and see what we can help with you with.
All right, Jason, I know you have a question, but we have 5 minutes for your questions, so we're gonna have to.
No, easy question. So
By the way, folks don't know, this is Jason Ferguson, is one of my directors of product security here at ConnectWise. Sorry, he does so much good work. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate everything you do, man. Thanks.
I want to go back to the beginning a little bit, and if we look at what the common compromises are recently, over the past 5 years, same things are happening 15 years ago, 20 years ago, phishing attacks, B, C. What was the tipping point? And I'm going to comment on something because a couple times I've heard the chuckle of we're the government, we're here to help. Everybody laughs. It is true, right? Your tagline is for the people. So what was the moment that you decided, there is a problem here, we need funding, we have to invest, we need to establish a solution and engage with this audience effectively? When did that occur? Because again, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you were warning us, we're under attack.
2004.
You were saying it constantly. This year you decided that's not enough.
So I want to make sure I understand the actual question, when did CISA, when did the federal government
Well, I would
determine?
say when did the federal government decide, not that you didn't care before, but now you care, and you're here for the people. We're going to help.
So I'm going to take a little offense to that question. We'll talk offline.
I think it was probably a variety of different incidents and activities, and the notion of JCDC, the collaborative, has been in the works with legislation for a few years now, and so we wound up at the point where we're moving out on that collaborative framework and that operational coordination across the community, and so where we are in the timeline with that, we're in our first year of our planning agenda, and we knew that this was a critical topic that we wanted to get to early on, and so that's why it's a part of our planning agenda for this year.
In a broader sense, what I think you're looking also as is that I think like everything in the federal government, they don't necessarily feel the pain until they feel the pain, and I think that was part of it. I think that Congress and generically the public, as we became more and more embedded with smartphones and things like that, there was always a touch point to it, and I think it was a culture shift in understanding that the internet isn't just something in a box in a room, right? It's everywhere, and therefore it has connections to all aspects of our lives. And I would say, from a personal, I think that would be my opinion on an election. There have just been some major things that's happened, and then I think the other thing is, frankly, our adversaries became smart in a different type of warfare, and that brought eyes to a different type of how we should be protecting ourselves.
And I'm going to say, it's spring, summer of 2021, right? JBS Foods, you had Colonial Pipeline, you have another name I'm not going to say in here, got hit, but you messed, it really was core targeted hits on U.S. critical infrastructure. And the ability for the telemetry that you have now to be able to confidently know who is doing this, right? This is just Patrick's opinion, it was one of your bigger tipping points for that ransomware task force that kicked in and called out, ransomware as cyber terrorism, right? And hats off to you guys for stepping up and doing that. And it was something we couldn't do for years in the government because of a lot of archaic processes and procedures, right? And you guys stepped up and much more progressive. So thank you for doing that.
And to be honest, we're behind, right? The federal government, like always, is a little bit behind, except in taxes. We know how to do that well. But we're trying to catch up, and I think that's what was the whole point of JCDC is that, we're not going to do it by ourselves.
Yeah,
There's no
we
way
can't
to
work
do
in
it.
a vacuum to try to address these things.
And so,
we need your partnership.
actively engaging is what we're here to do.
And just to recap, so hearing that, you notice the cultural shift, right? We're seeing the need for, and you saw the importance of the people in this room, what they're providing, and how we can protect it. So no, great answer, I appreciate it.
And to be, I have a very little background in cyber, and so me shifting over into the cyber realm was, I was bringing my planning expertise into the process and how things could be tackled and commander intent, that kind of way to figure out, trying to really look at it and solve it from a big picture. And I rely on you guys because, and my peers and, expertise within CISA, because at the end of the day, I can tell you how to get to somewhere, but I need the guy in the room to tell me how to execute it.
Thanks. I think we have one more? We have time for one more, folks. Sorry.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So my name is James Schmidt out of Springfield, Missouri. And one of the questions that I had is more around the framework and how it relates to cyber insurance. You talked about that earlier. And I'm going to say it's the wild, wild west right now in there. And I'd love to see what is the influence that CISA is coming through with a framework that can come to the SMB market. It's not FedRAMP, it's not CMMC, it's not some of these bigger frameworks that can be adopted at the cyber insurance level to say this is what we're going off of. Because right now attorneys are writing this and it's a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
What is CISA doing to be able to influence that arena, if any?
So from a JCDC perspective, we are not influencing cyber insurance in that bubble. I think that is, and it's definitely a hot topic we understand and we don't want to ignore it. I'm sure there are folks in CISA that are absolutely attuned to the issues that you're having. Taking my CISA hat off for a second, and as a person, I think that you have to realize for us that having that some sort of standardized framework will be a very hard thing to do because a lot of factors come into it. A lot of the insurance companies aren't based in the U.S. A lot of them are, we're having to work with different types of, you guys are having to work with them on a day-to-day basis, but I think also the frameworks that you currently use are, I don't necessarily know if we'll ever be able to have a full-on standardization. Because as you all are here, you all are different makeups and sizes and how you execute things. So there'll always be some variation, but it is definitely a hot topic that we aren't ignoring in terms of us taking back something. And if we have, we'll reach out and figure out if there's something specific we can help you point you in the right direction within CISA.
Yeah, again, CISA is not in the regulatory side of things, but a major takeaway that we're getting from this week and other conversations is that this is a pressing matter. And so much as CISA can and should be involved in that in terms of guidance and within the realm of its authorities, we want to make sure that that is something that the applicable folks on our internal side are aware of and tracking and thinking about in terms of, how can we support this and how can we help ensure that we're making things as easy as possible with information sharing and guidance. And, if there's a tie there, then with the insurance side, we want to make sure that that's known to those folks.
The only thing I can say, again, taking CISA off for a second, is I can only imagine that if you felt like you were getting more support from a federal entity like CISA in terms of showing that you're using type of guidance, being involved where we can, and certain those things, having conversations with your regional reps and stuff like that would only strengthen, I think, your core ability to do the things you're doing, and then posture to show to those folks that you are, trying to align with the right ways. But to stomp her kind of point is that we aren't a regulatory agency, and so currently that's a hard thing that until we don't have a big stick to say, hey, you have to use this. We always say, here's guidance. We hope you use it.
Yeah, and I think it's using that guidance for influence
Sure.
to bring the frameworks closer together in a cohesive manner.
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll for sure take that action. It was one of my things I thought about this week was an effort to figure out a way to help standardize kind of a NIST and those things that I've seen consistently.
Great question, thank you. All right, I know everyone's got other sessions to go to, but I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to present you guys with our challenge coins.
Oh,
and by the way, only a few people have solved it so far. And Jason, for asking that question, I'm going to out you. He is the one who created the challenge coin puzzle, so you can stalk him and maybe try to get the answer. So, but thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys coming and the partnership. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, Abby. So appreciate it. Thank you. Enjoy the conference. Thanks.